wilderness was alive with foreboding, though the soldiers of Major Francis Dade's column paid little heed to the signs. Over 100 men trudged along the sandy path through central Florida's dense pine forests on a sweltering December morning in 1835. Their mission seemed straightforward: reinforce Fort King, a critical outpost in the U.S. government's escalating efforts to remove the Seminole people from their ancestral lands. But beneath the surface, this march was far more than a routine military maneuver. It was a piece of a larger conflict steeped in betrayal and resistance. For years, the Seminoles had defied the government's push to uproot them under the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Signed into law by President Andrew Jackson, the act authorized the forced relocation of Native American tribes from the southeastern United States to lands west of the Mississippi River. The Seminoles, however, refused to leave the only land they had ever known. Treaties like Payne's Landing, signed in 1832, had been forced upon their leaders through manipulation and deceit, and when faced with relocation, the Seminoles had chosen resistance over surrender. For them, this was a fight for survival, and they intended to use every inch of Florida's unforgiving terrain to their advantage. As the soldiers advanced, the forest closed in around them. Live oaks draped with Spanish moss hung like curtains over the sandy trail, and the dense saw palmettos clawed at their boots. Major Dade, riding at the head of the column, reassured his men as he had done many times before. "The Seminoles are too few and too scattered to confront us," he said. His confidence seemed misplaced, but his men clung to his words. They had no idea that just ahead, hidden among the foliage, nearly 200 Seminole warriors lay in wait. McCanopy, the Seminole leader, had chosen this location carefully. The open stretch of ground where the soldiers would soon arrive provided no cover, and the dense forest on either side offered perfect concealment for an ambush. The march pressed on, and the tension among the men grew, and the eerie silence of the forest offered little comfort. Suddenly, a sharp crack shattered the quiet, the unmistakable sound of a rifle. Major Dade, the man who had exuded confidence, fell from his horse, blood blooming on his chest. Chaos erupted. The Seminoles, concealed in the trees, unleashed a deadly barrage of musket fire. Bullets rained down on the column from all sides, cutting through men and horses with lethal precision. The soldiers scrambled to form a defensive line, but they were woefully unprepared for an ambush of this scale. Their training had not prepared them for the guerrilla tactics of the Seminoles, who struck quickly and melted back into the wilderness before the soldiers could respond. Musket smoke thickened the air, mingling with the cries of the wounded and the roar of gunfire. For the Seminoles, this was no mere skirmish. It was a message to the U.S. government. The Seminoles had been pushed to the brink by years of broken promises and the threat of displacement. This ambush, led by McCanopy, Jumper, and Alligator, was a declaration to the U.S. government that the Seminoles would not go quietly. The battlefield was covered in a dense layer of fog and gunpowder. Rifle cracks and screams of agony rang out. Within an hour, the battle was over. The Seminoles, having achieved a decisive victory, melted back into the wilderness. Of the 108 soldiers who had begun the march, only 3 survived, crawling into the swamp to escape the carnage. The rest lay where they had fallen, their lifeless bodies scattered across the clearing. The Dade Massacre, as it would later be called, marked a grim turning point in the Second Seminole War. For the U.S. Army, it was a devastating loss and a bitter reminder of the challenges of fighting in Florida's unforgiving terrain. For the Seminoles, it was a moment of triumph and defiance, a small but significant victory in their fight for survival. The battlefield, silent once more, bore witness to the cost of broken promises and unyielding resistance. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the fallen, as the wilderness reclaimed its own. The echoes of that day would linger for years, a stark reminder of a war fought not just with weapons, but with the enduring will of a people refusing to be erased. Weeks later, a relief force discovered a grim scene. Burials were hurried, and the survivors' accounts spread like wildfire, shocking the nation. The massacre would become a rallying cry for the U.S. military, fueling a brutal and protracted conflict that would last for 7 more years. For the Seminoles, the Dade Massacre was a bittersweet victory. It slowed the US Army's advance and demonstrated their fierce resistance, but it also escalated the government's resolve to crush them. Over time, the war would take its toll, with many Seminoles killed, captured, or forced into exile. Yet, unlike other eastern Native American tribes, a small group of Seminoles would evade capture entirely, retreating deep into the Everglades, where their descendants live to this day. The massacre also underscored the tragic futility of the US government's policies of removal and expansion. Today, the Dade Battlefield Historic State Park stands as a quiet reminder of the events of that fateful December morning. Visitors walk the same ground where soldiers and Seminole warriors clashed. The grounds serve as a national cemetery for US personnel and their loved ones. The echoes of musket fire may have faded, but the lessons of the Dade Massacre remain, etched into the history of a land that has never forgotten its past.